Throughout the annals of history, there have been debates that have always been brought up, some in terms of politics, some about theories, and some about psychology. But in the nation of Australia, over the last 100 years or so, has been the debate of which of the so-called egg ball sports is the best, whether it be Aussie rules football or rugby league. Two of the most popular codes in Australia. Sides have been chosen, states have loyalty. Hell, I'm surprised the civil war hasn't broken out. As we talk about NRL versus AFL, the never-ending debate. Personally, it is a weird situation in Australia, to say the very least, when it comes to the sports of NRL and AFL. It kind of seems like the meta is that you've got to select one of them and then defend it with your life. It's kind of like a crusade, if you will. You got to choose one side and have the lead of whatever god is of AFL or NRL, and you've got to defend it with all your will. It's like you can't like the other sport. You got to choose, which to me is kind of weird. There is one way to kind of figure out which states and which territories usually have like either sport as the popular. It is known as the Baresi line. So pretty much anything south of the Baresi line, you're more in turn to be liking AFL and Aussie rules football. Anything north of it, you are most likely to be supporting rugby league. When it comes to me, I live on the north side of the Baresi line. I'm from Newcastle, which in terms of the hand egg sports, or the egg ball sports, whatever you want to call it, rugby league is very much the heartland of it. You do have some like AFL competitions here, and you do have players from the AFL who come from Newcastle, a big example being Isaac Heaney, who now plays for the Sydney Swans. But majority of the time, it's kind of, you've got to select NRL. But usually saying that you prefer AFL over NRL in Newcastle, you're either given weird looks at best, or just flat out derogatory comments at worst. And I feel like it is probably majoritively the same when it comes from the other side of the coin. I feel like someone in Victoria who prefers NRL to AFL, it's probably the same thing. It's a very weird mentality of how we can't just have, two people like different sports. You've got to choose one and just crap on the other. You see it either on TikTok by children who just either compare literally everything when it comes to both sports, whether it be attendance figures, revenue, how tough each sport is, or which is another way of saying which players are more likely to get irreversible brain damage and suffer after they retire. Like fun stuff like that. But also, you've got to remember, Facebook exists, and the same argument happens over with adults on those social media sites. Like, being from Newcastle, I prefer rugby league to AFL. Just because, because I've grown up around the sport, I think it's very common. I fit with the Baresi line of thinking. But I still very much like AFL. I'm not like most people where you say rugby league, it's like, and you say, like, and obviously there's a very, common insult of saying AFL, but you add a G and Y in between the A, and that, because you hear that a lot I heard that a lot when I was growing up. I remember in the lead up to Magic Round last year, Ned's interviewed a bunch of NRL fans up at Brisbane and asked them, what do you think about the AFL? And then they chose the most drunk, decrepit, teethless people to say, like, oh, the fucking AFL sucks. And then I think it was like the next week they did the same thing, and then it was literally just a repeat, except the codes got swapped. But like, when it comes to my AFL knowledge, I think the most obscure thing that I would probably be somewhat familiar with is that whole AFL trade rumors and information Facebook page and the person that runs it. I remember there was a video put up about it right near the end of last year, which was my favourite video made by any sports creator in Australia. It was very good. So that's pretty much in terms of the AFL iceberg, that's probably as low as it goes. But I very much like AFL, and I like the NRL. If we're going to go off in terms of the whole debate about like which one's better in terms of which one gets more viewership, which one's more popular, I think it settles as this. When it comes to, as nationally, as Australia, AFL is the bigger code. It just is. If you look at Google search terms and attendances, they are averaging higher. I think the only time when the NRL has higher Google search terms than the AFL is when it's the NRL Grand Final. And obviously the AFL actually finishes prior to the NRL, so it makes sense there. But I do feel internationally, I think the NRL is a bigger brand, so to speak. I know you get people from the AFL, like, you know, like Americans or people or like Europeans watching AFL. It's like, what is this sport? But I feel like in terms of a sport, I think rugby league is the bigger international sport because you have obviously England play it. There's a whole rugby league World Cup. Apparently there is an AFL World Cup, but Australia aren't invited for obvious reasons. But yeah, I think it's a weird debate to say the very least. I can understand why people would pick sides, but it's just, I've never really understood why it has to be a whole, oh, your egg ball sports suck. No, your egg ball sport sucks. I don't know, like, just grow up. And also, both sports suck. Lawn bowls is the best.